Welcome to HortTube. My name is Jim Putnam. This is the garden question and answer video that I do on Sundays. Got lots of your questions written down from last week. You can ask questions in the comment section down below the video, and that is where your question resides, and I pick from those each week. I am at the Giberson Garden down in Athens, Georgia. As always, sounds of water in the background when I'm filming. Filming at this garden, a beautiful waterfall back here behind me. The garden, of course, always looking great. It is super dry here in this part of Georgia in Athens. I mean, walking through the garden is definitely, it's wildly dry. We were so lucky back over in Raleigh to get some of that tropical storm Ophelia without it causing damage, but got 5 or 6 inches of rain out of it a week and a half ago. And again, this time of year, the days are shorter and all that kind of stuff, and that water has lasted. You know, the garden was still looking good before we drove out to come down here. And of course, this garden is always looking great. There's a playlist on the channel called Giberson Garden if you want to go and take a look at the videos that I've shot in this incredible garden in Athens, Georgia. And Tom and Ram have been on those videos before if you want to meet them. I put up a pruning video on the Learn to Garden video series. There's a discount code down below if you want to get $25 off the Learn to Garden video series. Again, pruning video went up this week. Lots and lots of content to come. That will continue to develop over another year or so. It's basically a series of gardening classes that once you buy them, you own them, and I'm continuing to add stuff to them without you having to pay for them anymore. And then this week, there was a 10 plants that won't move video that went up because we're going to be redesigning the garden quite a bit next year. And but there's some things in the garden that definitely are in their permanent home, won't be moved around the garden if you want to go back and look at that. And you will have seen a video at Creekside, Gardening with Creekside with Jenny and I. One over there on their channel as well. If you don't follow them, go over there and follow them. So with all that, we'll jump into some questions from this past week. Again, these are questions that were asked in last week's video. I may end up putting a second question and answer video up this week. I talked about doing it last week, but between the questions I left behind from 2 weeks ago's video and then 1 week ago video, by the time I'm done with this, there's a lot of available questions to answer. So again, you may see a second Q&A. Number one question, somebody had asked, weirdly, how did you meet the Gibersons? And then I was on the way here, I was like, that's an interesting question that I thought I would answer. So when I've been coming to Athens for several years, shooting video content, and you guys have maybe seen videos with Dr. Durr, who wrote the Woody Plant Manual and Propagation books, and a lot of books that we've used in the history of the, my time in horticulture. And then Dr. Armitage, also a professor was also a professor at UGA. Both are retired now. But Dr. Armitage did a lot of the books on perennials. So one of them, as they joke, one of them made you look down and one of them made you look up to shrubs and trees, or ground covers and perennials. And Dr. Armitage sent me some photos of this garden. We were going to meet up one day here in Athens and have breakfast. And he sent me some photos teasing me with this garden and said, "Are you interested in shooting video here?" And I was like, "Yes, I would. And so I met him over here, and met Ram and Tom, and we've become fast friends ever since. It's an incredible place to come. It's an oasis. Everywhere in this garden, there's water in the background, like you can hear. Right here, and they're just really nice people as well. Okay, so somebody asked how long bulbs can survive outside of the ground. So they're in California. They refrigerated their bulbs last year, had them come up, they bloomed, the tulips, and then wanted to know how long they could stay out of the ground because they dug them up apparently in the spring, and they've been out of the ground for approximately 7 months right now. Wanted to know how long they could stay out of the ground. The best thing to do probably would have been to leave them in the ground, through the summer, and then dug them up and then refrigerated them and then put them back in the ground later, just like you did last year. And that way they didn't spend a lot of time out of the ground, because as soon as they come out of the ground, they're in the process of dying because there's moisture in that bulb. And anytime it's out of the ground, that moisture is evaporating out of that bulb. The bulbs have probably gotten slightly smaller over time. And so the faster you can get them, you want to store them in a cool, dry place if you can, or a cool, dark place if you can, if they're out of the ground for a long time. But as quick as you can get them back in the ground, or into a refrigerator, the better. I don't know about these being out of the ground for 7 months. It seems like that's a long time. But again, the way I would do it in the future, if you want to re-refrigerate them, is probably just leave them in the ground until sometime in the summer and then dig them out, refrigerate them for 10, 12 weeks, late summer. Now, or sometime maybe 1st of September. Refrigerate them through the fall. That's about the time they'd have been coming out of the grounds over in the Netherlands, would have been sometime in late summer, and then they shipped across, and then we buy them, and then we refrigerate them, and then we put them in the ground, or not refrigerate them if you're in colder areas. It's unnecessary. So there you go. 7 months is a long time. Then I got a question about naturalizing bulbs in a lawn. And this person wanted to put daffodils in their Bermuda grass. The daffodils will still come up in the Bermuda grass. I see daffodils pretty frequently on like old house, some farmhouse that disappeared, but you'll still see some rectangle of daffodils still coming up every year where they were planted a long time ago. They're really rugged bulbs, and they really will come up through pretty much anything, including your Bermuda grass. But if you're naturalizing bulbs in your turf, I think daffodils may not be the best for that. There's a long period of time after they bloom that it takes them to fade back and be cut off, and there may be some extended period of time where it doesn't look very good. Okay, so some of the smaller growing bulbs, and you can Google this, there's several different bulbs that you could use that naturalize better in lawns, because when the flower is gone, the foliage doesn't look too bad. It's very short and closer to the ground, where the daffodils could potentially be 12, 14 inches tall, depends on which ones you're using. Some are dwarf, but most are pretty large. They're gonna look pretty bad out there in your lawn for an extended period of time. So maybe put the daffodils off to the side somewhere in a bed, and then look for bulbs that are just kind of better for naturalizing in turf. But will it compete with the Bermuda grass? Absolutely. They'll come up, bloom, as long as you don't cut them off too early and you let the foliage die back before you do anything to them to clean them up. They'll absolutely come back the next year, Bermuda grass or no Bermuda grass. And enough sunlight. So let's see. So somebody asked the best time to mulch to avoid winter weeds. Anytime now, anytime in October, September, October would be a good time to do it. I put mine about 6 months apart is what I would prefer. So I would like to do it like March 1st and then September 1st would kind of be ideal, I think. I think that's 6 months. Maybe that's 5 and 7. I don't know. That's about it. And that seems to be a good timing to prevent my spring and early summer weeds and my fall weeds from germinating. You're not going to prevent them all, but this is a good technique for limiting them for sure. Okay, so somebody wanted to know if they can put pine straw or leaves in their vegetable garden. So that's another video I shot this week. I don't know if it'll be up before you guys see this video, but I talked about winterizing my annual beds, which I consider my vegetable garden to be an annual bed. Despite the fact that some of the things we grow in the vegetable garden are perennials, and there's a question coming up about that in just a minute, tomatoes and peppers are actually perennials, we treat them as annuals. So all that stuff comes out. If you're not planting any kind of fall crop, then you do need to cover the soil for the winter, put it to sleep. Leaves are a great choice. Pine bark soil conditioner, compost, that can be cow manure, that could be mushroom compost, any kind of organic material you want to cover it with is a good idea. Pine straw might not be the best. I mean, that might be something I would remove in the spring. You absolutely use pine straw to put the thing to bed, keep it moist, keep the life alive in the soil, that kind of thing. But I don't think it would be good to mix it into the soil when you start planting in the spring in your vegetable garden. I'd probably use it in other areas, but I would absolutely use my leaves to cover the vegetable garden because they'll break down a lot and feed the soil between now and then. So here's a person who is leaving their leaves where they lie. So the leaves are falling off the trees and they're letting them lie around them. And so they're around their roses and everything else. And then they're coming back and they're mulching over the top of it, like March 1st, like I've talked about, that being a good time for mulching. So they're coming back with like hardwood mulch and putting that on top of all those leaves. Is that going to be too thick? Potentially. So I've got an area toward the back of the garden in Raleigh where, the leaves can just you know, there's an oak tree back there and the leaves can end up this deep, you know, 6-8 inches deep. That's too much. So what I do is I've been going back there after the majority of them fall, and then kind of raking them into areas where they didn't fall. So I only end up with a very thin coat of leaves in that area. So I'm just fanning them out and not allowing them to just pile up in one spot. And then I'm putting a very thin layer of mulch back there on top of it March 1st. So I am doing what you're saying, but I'm making sure that I'm not starting with 6 inches of leaves before I put that mulch cap on top of it. That's gonna just be too much. What happens is you build up that organic material like that, and I talked about it, maybe I talked about it in last week's video, I don't remember. You actually end up with dry sockets. When you pile organic material up 12, 18 inches, I've always found when I dig in that, some part of it will be moist, some part of it will be dry, it's just all over the place. So a thin layer of organic material, you know, on top of the soil is the best idea. So thin the leaves and then do the mulch cap like you're talking about. Okay, somebody asked in a video that I put up the other day where I planted all the container plants that we have in the vegetable garden. All of the container plants have been planted in the vegetable garden so that we didn't have to water them or maintain them through the winter, and I wasn't going to be planting any fall crops. And somebody asked if that was a Christmas jewel holly in that shot. Yes, I have a Christmas jewel holly that I've had in a container for 2 years. Really nice looking upright pyramidal holly. Smaller leaves, not very prickly, very heavy fruiting. It's a good one. It's a Southern Living Plant Collection one. Somebody asked about, I get this one all the time. So I think everybody understands if I say a plant is best grown in zone 7 to 9, that the reason it probably doesn't do very well in zone 6 is because the winter kills it, right? Because it gets too cold in zone 3, 4, or 5. But then I get the opposite question. If something is for zone 3 to 7, can it be planted in zone 8? And why couldn't it? Well, there's several things. Some plants need need chill hours. They need a certain amount of hours where the temperature drops below 50 degrees for the winter, and you just may not get enough of that in a zone 8 area. So sometimes it's about chill hours. And then other times it can just flat out be too hot in most of the areas with zone 8, but that can be very, you know, when I say something is hardy in zone 3 to 7, if it doesn't have anything to do with chill hours, like it doesn't need to go to sleep for some extended period of time, it could actually do okay potentially in zone 8A in the Pacific Northwest, or 8B in the Pacific Northwest, where it may not get as hot, although they've had some summers recently with some very hot summers, but their traditional summers aren't that hot, whereas zone 8B in the Southeast might be extremely hot. Could be humidity related, it could be dry air related, it could be a lot of different things where somebody said, we're pretty sure anywhere in 3 to 7 without having to go, and then zone 8 up in the Pacific Northwest and maybe zone 8 in the, you know, so it's possible if it has nothing to do with chill hours, because chill hours are important on things like blueberries and other plants need to go, they have particular amount of time they need to spend asleep during the winter. And it's basically a little trick they learn to not wake up too early, because we get these false springs everywhere. And so if a plant gets tricked and comes out of dormancy too early and then gets and then flowers and then gets slammed with cold, then it doesn't produce fruit or seed that year. And so the plant's kind of gone, in this area, I need to stay asleep for this period of time, and I'm not going to be fooled by a few warm days in January or February. So those plants need need a certain amount of time to be asleep before they wake up so they don't get fooled. Hope that's not too much information, but there's several reasons why it may not grow in zone 8. A little different than the other side where it's literally just, it's too cold for that particular plant. So somebody asked if they can reset prune an August Beauty gardenia. It's now about 10 feet tall. Yeah, you can cut it really, really hard. And they bloom on new growth in the late spring, early summer. And so, you know, sometime in March, I'd probably take the thing and cut it hard. It may take a little while for it to come back, and you probably won't have a lot of flowers this first year. But yeah, you know, I'd cut it down for sure and give it a try. Plants that have been are that old and that established tend to come back pretty vigorously because they have a large root system under the ground. So somebody asked about a reliable perennial verbena. And so they're talking about homestead purple being unreliable, and I've always found that the case as well. Homestead purple verbena, I basically treat as like a biennial, where I get 2 seasons out of it. The first year you plant it, grows a little bit, blooms pretty good during the summer. The second year it can get pretty vigorous and looks like a knockout in the garden, and then the third year it starts to take some sort of nosedive the other direction. And most of the ground cover verbena I've always just treated like that. I look at it and say that's going to last me 2 or 3 years, and then it's going to get thin and not be great sometime in the future. There's some dianthus that are like that too. Some things that just die in the middle and start to look rough over time. When we're talking about specifically like ground cover verbena here, I have verbena bonariensis at the house that gets tall and can be invasive some places, but it's a different, it's just a different growth habit. What we're talking about specifically here is the kind of ground cover verbenas, which you can get in white and purple and lavender and red and that kind of thing. Pink as well. Somebody asked about dividing lantana. This is an interesting question because most of the lantana we're talking about here are woody shrubs, and so most of the time there's only going to be like one in the container. If somehow a limb has laid on the ground and it's rooted in and it's become a separate plant, which is very possible, you can definitely cut that one away and divide it. But most of the time, you're looking at one plant, one woody plant in the container, and it's not really, or in the ground, it's not really going to be dividable. But they're super, super easy to make more. You can just lay a limb down on the ground and cover it with mulch and then cut it away the next year if you want to, or you can just take a cutting off of it right now. You can just take a piece about 3 inches long, like that, and root it. Anytime during the season next year, and they root super, super easy. So there's a lot of different ways you can create more lantana very, very quickly without digging it out of the ground and trying to find divisions down there, because it's unlikely, because it's just a woody plant with a single trunk, typically, unless again multiple plants were in a pot originally, or it's figured out how to root itself into the ground in a few different spots. Always another good spot to stand in the Giberson garden. So somebody said, do we have outdoor lightings in the garden back in Raleigh? No, not yet, but that's always been the plan. So the porch, the screen porch that was originally redone on the house, if you followed back to the beginning of the new house, if you go back and look at there's a playlist on the channel called New House. You can go back and see what the original screen porch looked like. New screen porch went in. I'm putting a greenhouse in one corner, and then the shed is in the other corner, and I'm actually gonna run lighting in a triangle between those 3 things. That's been the plan all along, just haven't gotten to that step yet. But there will be lighting back there. There is no uplighting on any of the plants though, and this will be lighting that I will turn on and off based on being out there or not being out there. On a personal level, this is my opinion, I think the night belongs to the night, and if I could take the street lamps and knock them out, and I've said this in a video before, if I could take out the street lights on my street, I would. I like the night being dark, but I do want some lighting just to for entertaining and to be out in the garden on nights in the winter and that kind of thing. But when I go to bed, I want to turn it off. I don't want to leave it on. But that's just, again, that's my opinion and my thoughts, and other people are going to want to uplight their trees and uplight the front of their house and keep those on 24/7, and that's theirs to do. Let's see. So somebody has mushrooms growing randomly at the base of plants and other places in their yard. Typically that's going to be dead roots under the ground. It could be dead roots on the plants that you're seeing the mushrooms under. Or typically I'll be walking around the neighborhood and I'll see a circle of mushrooms in someone's front garden, and I assume that's where a tree was at some point, and some of the roots are still there, and that's the circle. They probably came in, took the tree down, ground the stump out in the middle, but they left the roots going out from it. And so that's the circle of mushrooms you're seeing. But that's typically a lot of what you're seeing there is they're growing on dead organic material or dying, or they're breaking down organic material that's in the ground, some sort of wood. Let's see. Should you continue watering as things are going to sleep in the fall? I kind of answered this last week. I do. I think that, this is extremely, extremely dry here. I actually think it would be hard to wet this garden right now, but I can see that some of the conifers and some of the other things in this garden, because it is so dry, are thinning a little bit more than I would want them thinning. We'll see some, we'll see some plants losing some leaves. There's a holly here that's got some yellowing leaves down in the interior, just all over the place. You'll see it right now. That stuff can go to the extreme if it's extremely, extremely dry in your garden. So, you know, you don't have to water everything, but pick some of the things you really, really like and make sure they're not going to sleep under extreme stress of drought. They're not forced. I'm seeing a lot of fall color on things early this year, you know, in the wooded spaces, dogwoods showing their beautiful red color that they show off, you know, weeks before they normally would. Same thing with fire, you know, with a lot of the things just showing early color, and that's drought stress is causing it. So I don't want things to really go to sleep under extreme stress, because then I also think in the wintertime, you know, that's a plant that may be more vulnerable to having some additional damage done to it. So I do a little bit of watering here and there right through the fall, especially conifers, because conifers just are not good at telling you they're dry. They just tend to die or lose tons of needles all at once to compensate for how dry they are. Let's see, so somebody has an osmanthus that they had last year that the Arctic freeze back in December damaged, and then it started to leaf out again, and then they had a late frost on it, and then it got repeatedly damaged. And now it's blooming, but it's super, super thin. Should they prune out the damage? I would wait until late winter, early spring, give it a little bit of a light haircut right off the top, and it should start to flush back out and recover. It may still take a couple seasons. I don't know how badly it's been damaged. I'm not looking at it, but sometimes those things can take a little while. Depends on, if it's been in the ground for a while, again, it may have a root system that allows it to recover super fast. If it was just planted before that Arctic blast, then it's probably going to be slow to recover. But I would just give it a little bit of a haircut in the late winter. Don't go crazy cutting the thing in half while it's still a stressed plant. Let's see. So somebody has kaleidoscopobilia, and it's got some dead leaves, dead branches looking in the center of it. They want to know if they should go in there and start pruning out any of those brown branches and things. No, I wouldn't. I would wait till... Abelia is another one that blooms on new growth. It's part of the pruning video that I put on Learn to Garden this week. They bloom on new growth in the summertime. So in the late winter, that's the things I prune. So I'll prune my Radiance Abelia and my Miss Lemon Abelia, and if I had Kaleidoscopobilia, I'd prune it at that time. And you can get after them pretty hard, and that'll get some light down into the center of that plant and hopefully fill it back in. But I would wait to do it till then. Sometimes those branches that seem dead or dying or whatever may offer a little bit of protection to it during the winter time. So just leave it be until 1st of March maybe, or mid-March. Let's see. Somebody asked about pruning conifers. They've got a fern spray false cypress. It didn't get enough water and it's browned out in the middle. So they want to know if they should go in there and shake all those brown needles off. Again, sometimes this kind of material can maybe offer some protection to something from whatever reason. I wouldn't go in there and do all that. I would just wait until, again, late winter, give it a bit of a haircut. Don't shear all the green off of it, but you know, cut the tips of each branch off of it, and that should force some growth back from middle out. So that's the way I would go about that. Again, it's a late winter job for me. And then I always get questions about mulch fungus, so weird funguses and, you know, fungus that looks like dog vomit and all kinds of different fungus that we see in mulch. Sometimes, I mean, that's a wood material. And so just like I talked about mushrooms growing on the dying roots under the ground of old trees or existing plants that have been damaged for whatever reason. Same thing on your mulch. You just get a different group of fungi that will, you know, break down smaller pieces of wood material that are on the ground. None of them are doing any harm, you know, and so I know they can be unattractive, and a lot of people freak out about them. I get all kinds of questions. What do I do? In a panic? Nothing. In some years there'll be more, and some years there'll be less. You'll notice, probably based on how wet it is, how humid it is, how hot it is, how dry it is, you'll see an ebb and flow in the amount of fungi you're seeing. But keep in mind what that thing's doing is breaking down your mulch and making your mulch, making those nutrients in your mulch available to your plants. That's what's happening. So it's a good thing, although it can be unattractive. Somebody's question was they're predicting some sort of super El Nino this year, so it could be wetter and colder in the southeast United States? Would people prepare differently, based on this? Would they mulch more? Would they do, what might you do to have more winter protection in the garden? I'm always thinking about winter protection in the garden because I got a lot of things that are marginally hardy. So I'm thinking about collecting sheets and towels and blankets and frost protection blankets and all those kinds of things. I keep them on hand, prepared to cover things. So I'm always kind of a little bit prepared to do these kinds of things. But I don't, unless somebody's telling me something is happening tomorrow or 5 days from now or something like that, where it's going to be extremely cold, extremely hot, extremely dry, tornado, not a tornado, but hurricane coming, that kind of thing. I don't really do anything to adjust to the weather. I've been in the nursery business for so long that you just hear. I've watched over the time that I've been in horticulture the news more and more become, or the weather become more and more part of the news, and less about predicting what's happening tomorrow or 3 days from now or 5 days from now or 7 days from now. It's just become, how bad can we make it sound so that people will watch us tonight? And we're going to predict the doom and gloom of, tornadoes coming and, all kinds of stuff. And just weird reactions to it now. People, I don't know. I'm not a big fan of weather being news. Weather should just be weather. We should predict it, and then people react to it, and government organizations that have a role and whatever. Those folks in those roles react to the forecast and not the, oh my God, it's going to be, this is going to happen or that's going to happen. I remember a few years ago, there was a chance of tornadoes I was in Johnston County, North Carolina. There was a chance of tornadoes that day, and they hyped it to the point that the school system literally shut down and people went home for the afternoon. And I remember thinking we had built these really, the taxpayers had built these incredible brick buildings where all these kids were housed. And what we did was we put them on school buses and drove them to wherever they lived, dispersed them all over the county into different places. And I was thinking, wouldn't the best place have been to just leave them in the brick building at school? Again, weather as, that's what weather as news looks like to me. And so I don't do anything. I just feel like somebody probably just trying to get more clicks on something. And when it's predicted that it's going to be colder, you should be prepared. Just in general, you should know what you're going to do. We all saw what happened in Texas a few years ago, not just to the plants, but to people's pipes and plumbing and all kinds of things. So being prepared if the power's out, is the power going to be out for some period of time? Do I have covers for my plants? All those things, are things that we should always be thinking about anyway. I would just talk way too much about that. I'll probably get some people not like that so much. I don't know. Let's see. So somebody asked about overwintering peppers and tomatoes. They can be overwintered in a greenhouse. They're both perennial. You can take cuttings on them and root them and then keep them in a greenhouse through the winter, some sort of heated greenhouse. They need lots of light, so they don't necessarily perform very well in a house, even in a bright window necessarily. They need to be outside, but they can be kept through the winter. You can root cuttings, have them in some sort of heated greenhouse during the winter time. They need lots and lots of light, and they need lots and more than you think. And then same thing with peppers. A couple more questions and we'll wrap this up. Somebody asked about moving butterfly bushes. This would be done in the late winter. You can cut them back to 18 inches tall or 12 inches tall, ever how much you normally cut them back, because we do typically cut butterfly bushes back in the late winter because they bloom on new growth. So having the old plant standing there is not a whole lot of value. So I cut them way down. At that time, you can pop them out of the ground and move them. There is a video on the channel for moving butterfly bush. There's also one for moving lantana. We talked about lantana early. There's not, spoiler alert, there's really not any difference. I could make how to move a Japanese maple video and it'll get tons of views, and then I can make, how to move a woody plant video and it will get very few views, but it's the exact same video as moving the Japanese maple. It's almost always the same. Everything's the same. Typically you can root prune them in the fall, and then you can move them in the late winter, early spring. I've just I probably should just go and make a video how to move each individual thing, because again, they get more views, and I think people are searching for that particular thing, so it probably would be better for my channel overall to get more specific in something like that. But again, I don't want to, it's the same thing. It's the same video over and over and over again. Let's see. Somebody had last question. Somebody had a Golden Falls weeping redbud, and some of the top got knocked off, broken out somehow. Will it put that growth back on? No, you're gonna have to stake a piece. I got a buddy in the neighborhood that bought some weeping Golden Falls redbud that were small, and he wanted, how long is it gonna take to be the height of yours? It won't ever be the height of mine, probably, because he's gonna have to stake another piece up. So in the spring, as you're starting to get new growth, you could stake one of those pieces up and then allow it to grow vertically for a while, and that will become your new leader. And then from the top of that, you'll start to get weeping pieces. But you're gonna have to stake up a new piece to gain height in your Golden Falls weeping redbud, which we have that one at the house. And it was in the 10 plants that won't move video this week. If you wanna go back and take a look at it, it's actually in the thumbnail for that video with a giant question mark across it. So thank you guys very much for participating in the question and answer videos. Leave your questions down below, and I'll be back next Sunday with another one, or possibly beforehand with a second one this week. Thanks for watching.